The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character.
Dad did not make his voice louder when he said it. He did not need to. The room was already quiet enough to hear the clock over the fireplace ticking like it was counting down to 0. "Sign the transfer," he said in a calm way, sliding the folder across the table. "Every bit of the $18,400,000 goes to your sister." I looked at the paper, the names, the numbers, and the look of certainty on his face. "I am not signing," I said. That is when my mom stood up so fast that her chair made a loud scrape on the floor. Her hand came out of nowhere. Smack. "You do not have a choice," she screamed. The heat from my mom's hand stayed on my face, but I did not give her the joy of seeing me flinch. I did not cry. I did not ask her why. My anger was not loud this time. It felt like a job. I stood up with a straight way of holding myself that they had not seen before. It was the kind of posture that comes from years of standing on construction scaffolding while they stood in fancy ballrooms. I looked at my watch. It was 11:50 p.m. By the time I reached my car, the shock had already turned into a balance sheet. I drove away from the red brick mansion without looking back once. The smell of their expensive tea was still sticking to my hair like a legacy that was dying. I was not just leaving a room. I was getting out of a contract I never signed. I got to my work studio 10 minutes later. The silence there was different. It was mine. I opened my laptop and felt the hum of the computer against my fingertips. This was not a breakdown. It was accounting. I had been the silent investor in their version of a family for 29 years, and it was time to check the books. I logged into the firm's storage server, the digital safe holding every building plan, every repair secret, and every expert license needed for our $18,400,000 state contract. Madison thought she was the boss of this empire because she was the face of the social media accounts. She did not realize she was just the paint on a building I had built stone by stone. I pulled up the admin settings. My mom and dad had spent years treating my kindness like a bank account. They could use too much without a limit. They saw me as a tool, a part in a machine that only worked to make Madison's image look good. While Madison was being handed the keys to a luxury SUV, I was being told to take the subway to save the company's money. While they threw thousands into club fees and fancy clothes for the favorite child, I was quietly paying the firm's back taxes to keep us from losing everything. I had spent 3 years paying $16,500 a year just to keep the lights on in a building they thought they owned. At 12 sharp, I moved the mouse over the server kill switch. I had put this safety feature in years ago, an old habit from Grandma Alina who taught me that trust is a feeling, but a signature is a fact. I clicked deactivate. Seconds later, the firm's main servers went dark. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. Every blueprint for the Boston Heritage Restoration Project was now locked behind a code only I had. I had been a subscription they had enjoyed for free, and now the bill was due. I rubbed my eyes, trying to find a bit of regret, but I only felt clear. They were not shocked by what they had done to me. They were only going to be shocked that I had stopped doing what they wanted. Inside the room, my laptop screen was bright like a different kind of morning. It was the kind of light made of facts, numbers, and quiet payback. It was calm and lethal. The change was finished by 12:05 a.m. The person who built their comfort was gone, and the ground they stood on was already starting to break. As I sat in the blue light of my screen, I felt the sting on my face finally start to go away. It was replaced by a cold, familiar feeling of clarity. For 29 years, I lived in a house that felt like a building plan with a missing room, me. While my sister slept in the biggest bedroom with the balcony looking at the garden, I was put in the small storage area under the back stairs. They called it smart use of space and cozy. But even when I was a kid, I knew it was just a place for a person they did not really want to see. Everything in that house was a show for status. But I was the only one looking at the walls that actually held the house up. I remember being 11 and watching my dad brag about the strong history of the firm. I sat on the floor where no one noticed me, tracing the tiny cracks in the wood on the ceiling of the dining room. I was not just a quiet girl. I was a person surviving while wearing a chain no one could see. People often think being quiet means you are weak or have no spirit, but they do not see the way you are watching everything. I was living in a jail without bars, a place of emotional neglect where the rules were made to keep me small so my sister could look important. But these invisible chains became my training area. Because I was never invited to the front of the stage, I learned how to find the exits. I spent almost 3 decades watching every crack in their foundation and every lie in their books. I learned that when you are the person the family thinks will always be okay, you are the only one who actually knows how to survive when the lights go out. My grandma, Alina, was the only one who saw me waiting in the shadows. She was a woman who talked about facts, not feelings. I can still hear her scratchy voice at her kitchen table. The air smelled like tea and old paper. She would push a pile of records toward me and say, "Olivia, do not look at the totals they want you to see. Look at the gaps. Some things are clearer to people who are not waiting for everyone to clap for them." She was right. Being the favorite is like a bright light that makes you blind. But for the person left in the dark, it gives you a perfect view of the truth. I spent the time after I turned 21 getting the expert masonry licenses they said were just manual labor. Meanwhile, my sister was busy making a fake image of success. I did the hard math for the $18,400,000 state contracts, while my mom complained that my dark blue dresses did not look good enough for the company holiday photos. I realized tonight that I do not owe them my silence anymore. I had been the wall holding this family up for my whole life, keeping a roof over them that only protected them. But a wall can also be a block. My kindness had been a bank account they used too much for years, thinking the money would never run out. Now I was looking at the balance sheet, and they were in debt. The foundation was ready to break, and for the first time in 29 years, I was not going to be the one to fix it. I was going to let it fall. The quiet in my studio was broken by my phone shaking against the glass desk. It was not a sorry. It was a digital attack. My sister's texts came like fast bullets. Each one was more angry than the last. "Traitor, thief, jealous failure," she wrote. I did not answer a single one. I went back to my ledger. My silence was a boundary they did not know how to handle, a blank space in a contract they were used to changing whenever they wanted. By 1 a.m., my mom had moved the fight to the public eye. She posted a long, rambling message on a Boston Heritage forum, making it look like a sad family story about a daughter who was mentally sick. She claimed I had ruined an $18,400,000 project just to be mean. She even used my doctorate in engineering as a sign that I was losing my mind, saying that my focus on old stones had finally broken my grip on reality. To her, a daughter who studied instead of performing was a problem to be managed, not a professional to be respected. My sister did not wait for the servers to reboot. She called our biggest competitor before the sun came up, trying to give them the restoration work before the state board noticed the digital blackout. She thought that because she had the title of vice president on her business card, she had the power. She did not realize that in the world of high-stakes preservation, the title is just wallpaper, but the certification is the structural steel. By morning, the block was total. The competitor's lawyers had checked the state contract for the $18,400,000 restoration. It was a very strict, tough document that needed a master mason on site for every part of the work. There were only 4 people in the entire state with that level of license, and I was the only one on our firm's payroll. My sister had spent years pretending she was good at the job. But now the paint was peeling in the harsh light of a Monday morning. She could not hire her way out of this gap in her knowledge. The firm's top status was a rental she could no longer afford because the owner, me, had just ended the lease. My kindness had been the silent oil in their gears for 29 years. And now that I had drained it, the whole machine was starting to smoke. The louder they screamed about my betrayal, the more I realized their power was just an act, and I had finally stopped paying for the tickets. I met with my attorney, Victoria, at 10 a.m. sharp. She did not offer me any sympathy. She offered a thick tan folder filled with the results of the audit. This was the professional move I had been getting ready for while my family was busy making posts on social forums. Victoria had spent 48 hours digging into Grandma Aliner's Heritage Restoration Trust. This was the $18,400,000 engine that powered our family name. What she found was not just them picking a favorite. It was a crime. Victoria slid a paper across the desk and pointed at 3 specific deals. "Olivia, look at these consultant signatures," she said, confirming trust withdrawals that added up to $2,100,000. I stared at the ink on the page. It looked just like my handwriting. It had the same exact slant and the same professional style, but I had been at a research site in Greece when these papers were dated. It was a fake. Dad and Mom had not just been mean. They were criminals. My own parents had been taking money from the restoration fund for years to keep up a status they did not earn. It was $2,100,000 of theft hidden as family business. In that moment, I realized that their power was an illusion, like a high-end rental they could not afford without my stolen credit. This was the perfect example of the empty wallet trick. They spent decades looking down on me from a high place I was paying for without knowing it. Their elite status, their memberships at the country club, and even my sister's designer clothes were all built on a foundation of stolen money. They were not actually wealthy. They were just good at pretending while someone else did the math. My parents were so obsessed with the image of success that they gave up the reality of it. When you build a house on a lie, you have to keep stealing more bricks just to keep the roof from falling in. I looked at the fake signature and felt very clear. My kindness had been the luxury they used too much. But this was the hard stop. Love had been a contract where I was the only one giving something up. Now I realized it had been a subscription, where I was paying the bill for people who did not even like the person giving them the service. This was not a family breakdown. It was a total liquidation. Victoria leaned back, and her eyes were sharp. "They have been living on a line of credit they stole from your future," she said. My family had spent 29 years acting out a life they did not own. Their power was not inside them. It was a costume they bought with fake checks. They thought they were better than me because they held the champagne glasses while I held the building plans. But they forgot that I was the one who owned the cellar. When the money stops, your character is all that is left. And in that room, their character was nothing at all. They were weak because their status was a rental, and the landlord was done being ignored. I looked at Victoria and nodded my head. "Draft the formal notice," I said. "Give them 30 days to start a repayment plan for the $2,100,000 before we file criminal charges." I was not just getting my money back. I was auditing their souls. The Boston Heritage Forum post from Mom now seemed pathetic. It was a desperate attempt to make the only person who knew the wallet was empty look bad. I did not feel anger anymore. I felt the cold, efficient satisfaction of an architect watching a weak building finally start to fall down because it was too heavy for itself. The rain was making the stone path outside my workroom slippery when the bell finally made a sound. I did not move fast to answer it. I let the noise bounce around the high ceilings. It was a steady reminder that the life they built was finally asking for an answer they did not have. When I finally opened the door, they looked very small. Dad's suit had wrinkles, and Mom's eyes were red like a trapped animal in fear, not from being sad, but from pure panic. Sister stood behind them with her wet designer coat, looking like a person with nothing left inside. I stayed behind my drafting table and did not tell them to sit down. For 29 years, I sat in the corner of the room near the wall. I was the girl no one saw who was supposed to disappear while Sister stood in the middle. Now they were in my space, and I was the one holding the power. Dad tried to use that bossy voice he had used to keep me quiet for 29 years. "Olivia, this has gone too far," he said, trying to make his shoulders look broad. "We are a family, and your sister has a deadline. The state audit for the Heritage Restoration Project is in 48 hours, and the board is demanding your master mason's signature on the certifications. You are sabotaging an $18,400,000 legacy." I looked at the folder in his hand. It was the same one he pushed at me on the wood table at the big house days ago. "Sign the affidavit, Olivia," Mom begged, her voice sounding shaky. "We are losing the house. We are losing everything." "Authority is not a performance, Dad," I said in a calm way. "It is a fact." I reached into my bag and pulled out the gray fireproof folder. I did not slam it down. I slid it across the glass desk very carefully. It stopped right in front of him, just like the moment that was supposed to have broken me. Sister grabbed it first. Her hands were shaking so much she almost broke the metal clip. Inside were not apologies. They were the bank records for the $2,100,000 you took while I was finishing my master masonry in Greece. "You acted as interim trustees and used that window to forge my signature on shadow accounts," I told them. "You thought I would never look at the foundation, but you forgot. I am a mason. I always check the foundation before I trust the walls." The room became as quiet as the stones I work on for a job. Mom's face lost all its color until she looked like a stone statue on a falling church. Then I gave them the last piece of information. I turned to the part about who takes over in Grandma Aliner's will. "Ma'am," I said, looking Mom right in the eyes, "do you know who really holds decision-making authority over every cent of this $18,400,000 estate?" Dad's face got tight, but his loud voice was gone. "We are the parents," he said in a quiet, weak way. "It is a family business. The $18,400,000 is held in a protected heritage trust established by Grandma Aliner," I said. "As the sole executive and the only person holding the required dual certification in engineering and master masonry, the state treasury will not release a single cent without my verified signature. You didn't just try to steal my career. You tried to break into a legal fortress you don't have the keys to. My attorney already tried to tell you, Dad. It is not yours. I am the sole executive. I have been for years. You did not invite me to that meeting to talk. You invited me to comply with a lie you were already living. But I was never the backup plan. I was the safeguard Aliner put in place to keep you from burning it all down for a round of applause." Sister looked at me with tears ruining the makeup that was the only thing she ever gave to our name. "Please, Olivia, help us," she said. I walked to the door and opened it. The cold Boston air felt better than the air in that room. "I already told you," I said, my voice steady. "I am not signing. Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye, Mom." I watched them walk out into the rain, looking small and quiet, while I stayed inside the walls I built myself. Losing everything did not feel like a win. It felt like a fix. The state audit happened, and since my signature wasn't on their fake papers, the company's deals were taken away. Mom and Dad had to sell the big house, the cars, and the jewelry collection Mom used as armor against her own insignificance. They moved into a tiny apartment near the highway, living with very little money. Sister's marriage ended when the truth of her fake image was shown to be nothing but stolen plans. I did not brag. I just updated the books. I used the $18,400,000 to build something that would last longer than their pride. I started the Aliner Vocational School for Historic Restoration. It's a place where kids who grew up being ignored like I was could learn how to make old things strong again. We fixed a community center in a part of Boston my parents never would have visited. Watching those young masons handle a tool for the first time gave me more joy than any money in the bank. This was the justice of the seeds. True payback is not hurting your enemies. It is building a life so good that their mean actions don't matter anymore. Today I am standing on the scaffolding of an old church. The cold Boston wind is hitting my face, making me feel real. I am not the invisible girl under the stairs anymore. I am the boss of my own peace. Dad called me last week from a burner phone, his voice sounding small and shaky, asking to meet. I waited in the silence, then I hung up. I did not need him to say sorry to be okay, and I did not need his permission to exist. My kindness is not a subscription he can use anymore. It is a resource I save for people who deserve it. To those of you listening who have spent your life being the wall for a family that won't see you, your rules are not a betrayal. Your clear mind is not mean. You do not owe your silence to people who use it to stay comfortable. You have the right to take your bricks and build your own house. It takes guts to cut the chain, but the view from the top is great. If you have ever had to find your worth after someone else treated you like second place, subscribe and share your story. This is a group for the invisible people who decided it was time to be seen. Thank you for being here and listening.